This is a short overview of the capabilities of Insight Maker. It's not intended to be an introduction to how to use Insight Maker, but just to acquaint you with some of the broad array of capabilities that Insight Maker offers you. If you want to get started to jump right in and get something done, then I recommend the introduction video, which is only about 10 minutes long, and I'll show you where that is in a minute. So Insight Maker is a web-based multi-user modeling and simulation environment where you can develop lots of different kinds of models, and some of them are dynamic that you can simulate. So you can develop causal diagrams to indicate the relationships between a number of elements. You can develop rich pictures, causal loop diagrams, so sort of a hybrid between rich pictures and causal loop diagrams where there are indications as to whether the influences are balancing and reinforcing, and the fact that there are loops and labeling the loops. You can develop simulation models which have a more rigorous definition of the way that the elements are related to each other, where every component has a or every element has a formula that defines the relationship between the elements that are connected to it, and you can run the simulations. Sometimes they're more engaging than others. Sometimes they're just downright boring. And with Insight Maker, you can also do agent-based modeling where there are entities that interact, and you can simulate the way that the individual entities interact as opposed to a generalized dynamic simulation. This is just a simple agent foraging model where the animals forage for food, and once they consume the food, the entity changes, and it sort of reestablishes itself after some period of time. So those are the primary types of models that you can develop with Insight Maker. There are also a couple others. We've figured out how to develop mind maps, dialogue maps, and systemograms as other types of diagrams, simply because we relaxed the rules for how you can connect the components to create the elements of the model. In addition to all of those different types of diagrams, Insight Maker is also capable of doing vector notation or arrays in models, so that this is a simple rabbit birth rate population model, and if you run it, it shows you how the population develops over time, though the individual elements of this model are defined in such a way that they are or can be vectors or arrays. So depending upon the way that we set this, we can say that this is now a population or a simulation model for two different populations of rabbits, or it could be for 6 different populations of rabbits, depending upon how you define the interaction. So the vector or array capabilities for Insight Maker are extremely powerful. In addition, there are some other functions that are here. There's a scratch pad that makes it very convenient for making notations on a model, which works a lot better with a pen and a tablet than it does with a mouse, or if you're using some device that allows for touchscreen, so that you can highlight things if you're doing a presentation about the model. And it isn't saved, it's only there for as long as you're actually in that model, so you can turn it back on and do other notations. There's the options to do sensitivity analysis and optimization. You can also take a model. Once you've developed a model, you can embed it in a web page or wiki page or a blog or somewhere else. Once you develop a model, you can simply take the URL for that model and email it to someone else, and they can then interact with the model. They can't change it, but they can interact with it. Or if they find a model that they like, they can clone it to make a copy of it which then belongs to them, and they can do anything they want to with it. Now, additionally, any model that you create, you can also go ahead and develop a story around it so that you can define the way that that model unfolds to the user. In this particular one, it simply provides a description of these individual elements of the model and the relationships as it unfolds. And the storytelling capability is very powerful in that not only does it allow to change the visibility of the various components, it also allows to change the parameters so that the entire API, there's actually an API that's been defined for Insight Maker, which is quite robust, has a large number of functions that you can create, are functions that you can use to interact with the model in different ways. So that one of the ways, I'm unfolding this model and actually changing the parameters of the model to rerun it so it does different things. So that if you look at this, this is the story for this particular model. It talks about setup, it runs an action, and within the action block you have access, you can use all of the API commands as well as the entire JavaScript programming language. This changes the visibility of a bunch of the elements. This shows a message. This adds some pieces to the model. You get down here and it changes the value of one of the components and runs the model again, and then it changes some other things, closes some windows, and displays a closing message. And so here are all of the different components that you can use to build a story with. And there's a separate video on how to do storytelling. So that because models have a tendency to be overwhelming when people get a hold of them all at once, and seldom do they come with enough documentation so that someone else can understand them. If you unfold a model as a story, people get to see the model or experience the model in the way that you mean for them to. You unfold the model as a story that describes. It's like watching a play, one act at a time, and the relationships are the interaction between the actors, and it tells you about how the relationships interact and the implications of those interactions, and a person gets to see it as it unfolds. So in addition, is there an addition? I don't know. Well, you can also look at all of the equations that are in the model, and you have access to the entire set of code that represents the description of the model itself, so that you could copy this and paste it, take it out and save it, put it back in. What else? Add story help. There is built-in help within Insight Maker to an extent, though the help that's actually built in is not quite as extensive as what we're building into the Insight Maker User's Guide, which is online, which is a network of elements that explain all of the different components along with videos and example models that talk about those particular elements. And in the notes section of this video, there will be a link to where this user's guide is, as well as Insight Maker. And hope this has been, sort of a Federal Express overview of the array of capabilities that are offered to you in Insight Maker as a web-based multi-user modeling and simulation environment that's completely free for you to use to help you develop understanding of the relationships within situations. Take care. Bye.